The crystalline walls of the Citadel Council chamber hummed with barely contained energy, reflecting the incandescent light of the central core and casting long, dancing shadows across the faces of the assembled dignitaries. Outside, the swirling nebulae of xylos painted an ethereal canvas against the reinforced transparasteel, a stark contrast to the oppressive gravity that seemed to press down on the gathering. A palpable tension hung in the air, a miasma of fear and uncertainty that clung to every shimmering scale and segmented carapace. The whispers, the nervous rustling of chitinous armor, the barely suppressed clicks and hisses, all spoke of the gravity of the situation. This was not a routine session of the council, not a debate over trade routes or resource allocation. This was a reckoning. At the head of the circular chamber, radiating an almost palpable aura of dread, sat the Grand Arbiter, Cathar, his mandibles twitching in a rhythmic, almost frantic cadence. The Arbiter was a being of immense age and experience, his wisdom sought across countless star systems, his decisions shaping the fate of civilizations. Yet even he, a being who had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, who had negotiated with species that communicated through psychic echoes and those that consumed starlight for sustenance, seemed unsettled. Before him, the holographic projections flickered, displaying the crude, erratic movements of the Terran vessels, their peculiar shapes and unsettling weapon signatures. The reports continue to be inconsistent, Cathar finally intoned, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that resonated through the chamber. The Xylar survey teams have observed, and I quote, a baffling lack of strategic cohesion coupled with instances of unpredictable, almost reckless aggression. Is it not clear, despite the supposed technological deficiencies of this primitive species, that there is reason for fear? A ripple of unease swept through the chamber, the collective apprehension growing with each passing cycle. Across the chamber, the representative of the krill, a species known for their unwavering pragmatism and military prowess, shifted in their seat, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the flickering images of the Terran fleet. Arbiter, with all due respect, such descriptions lack any credible foundation. The primary data suggests a clear weakness. Their weaponry seems crude. Their ship designs are inefficient. If, as has been suggested, this species poses a threat, it is more likely due to a lack of understanding than any inherent strategic advantage. A chorus of agreement, a cacophony of clicks and hisses rippled through the chamber. The krill had a point. The Terrans, or humans, as they called themselves, were a technological backwater. Their initial transmissions, intercepted by the Xylar explorers, had been riddled with errors, their communication protocols seemingly rudimentary. Their ships lacked the advanced energy shielding and hyperdrive technology that were standard throughout the known galaxy. Even their physical forms, so poorly adapted to the harsh conditions of space, seemed a liability. Yet the unease persisted. It clung to the Council like an insidious infection, fueled by the unsettling inconsistencies in the data. The representative of the Sylvan, a species whose entire civilization was built upon precise calculation and predictive algorithms, spoke, their voice a melodic chime. My analysis is more nuanced. While the surface data indicates weaknesses, there are anomalies. Their tactics, though seemingly chaotic, often yield unexpected results. Their communication, although initially chaotic, sometimes reveals a complex internal structure of social constructs. Cathar nodded slowly, his multifaceted eyes fixated on the Sylvan representative. Explain these anomalies, Sile. The primary one resides in their decision-making process. The humans appear to be driven by something other than the standard motivations we have come to expect. They do not seem to value resources or territory. Their emotional responses are illogical. They display behaviors that, in other species, would be considered self-destructive. A wave of disquiet washed over the Council. Self-destruction was a concept rarely encountered in the vast expanse of known space. Even the most warlike species, the krill included, possessed a fundamental instinct for survival. The humans, according to the data, seemed to lack this. They were capable of extraordinary feats of heroism and equally extraordinary acts of self-sacrifice. They seemed to embrace risk. They seemed to enjoy it. And their weapons? The krill representative interjected, his voice sharp. Crude, yes, but the yield of their primary offensive devices is substantial. Even primitive devices can do significant damage if wielded correctly. Agreed, Cathar replied, and the Xylar scouts report that their ships often employ a variety of defensive countermeasures that, while not technologically advanced, are consistently effective. They adapt rapidly. They learn quickly. And most unsettling of all, they display a level of empathy that we have rarely witnessed. Empathy in the context of galactic warfare was a weakness. It led to hesitation. It led to compromise. It opened the door to betrayal. The humans at this stage are unknown, Cathar announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. But their unpredictable nature, their willingness to engage in high-risk maneuvers, their potential for unexpected evolution and rapid technological development, all these things must be considered. We cannot afford to underestimate them. We must not make the same mistakes we made with the Gralak. A collective shudder ran through the council. The Gralak, a species that centuries ago had been dismissed as primitive, a species that in a sudden, brutal war had nearly brought the galaxy to its knees. The memory of the Gralak conflict still lingered, a scar on the collective consciousness of the galactic civilizations. "I propose we send a delegation," the Sylvan representative said, their melodious voice cutting through the tension. "An exploratory mission cloaked and shielded to observe the humans more closely, to attempt communication, to understand their motivations." A wave of murmurs rippled through the chamber, a mixture of caution and tentative agreement. It was a risky proposition. Contact with a new species always carried the potential for disaster. But the potential rewards, the understanding of a new power, were too significant to ignore. "Agreed," Cathar finally announced. "The Sylvan will lead the delegation. The Krill and Xyler shall provide escorts. The mission parameters are clear: observe, analyze, do not provoke. Above all, do not initiate any hostile action." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the council chamber. "Let us hope, for the sake of the galaxy, that the humans are more reasonable than they appear." The first faint signal reached the bridge of the Starseeker, the flagship of the Sylvan exploratory delegation. A soft chime, a signal that had traveled light years, cut through the hum of the ship's systems. The bridge was a symphony of holographic displays and shimmering interfaces. The Sylvan crew, their bodies elongated and graceful, their internal organs visible through their translucent skin, moved with fluid precision. The Krill and Xyler security forces, stationed in strategic positions, their armor gleaming in the soft light. "Incoming transmission, Prime Observer," a Sylvan technician announced, their voice a melodic chime. "Origin, human vessel, signal strength, moderate, data packets, fragmented." Prime Observer Lyra, her head adorned with a complex array of sensory organs, turned to face the technician. "Decode the signal, patch it through to the main display." The main display flickered, then resolved into a visual. It showed the interior of a human vessel. The humans were unimpressive. Their technology seemed archaic, their ship designs utilitarian. Their uniforms were drab and functional. Their faces, however, were intriguing. They were diverse, displaying a variety of skin tones, facial features, and expressions. Their eyes, though, were what caught Lyra's attention. They were alive, filled with intelligence and curiosity, and a surprising lack of fear. A human, seemingly in charge, stepped forward. He had a strong jaw, dark eyes, and short-cropped hair. His expression was calm, almost friendly. He spoke in a language unknown to the Sylvan, but the ship's universal translator, after some initial difficulties, began to work. "Greetings," the human said, his voice clear and concise. "We are the crew of the Endeavor. We have detected your vessel and are attempting to establish contact. We come in peace." Lyra exchanged a look with the Krill commander, a creature whose hardened expression rarely softened. The Krill's opinion on this species was already well known. "Answer them," Lyra instructed the technician. "Initiate the standard diplomatic protocols." The human vessel responded in kind, their communication clear and concise. They expressed their interest in a peaceful exchange of information. They offered to share their technology, their knowledge, their culture. They were, in the words of the Krill commander, deceptively polite. The first few cycles of contact were a period of cautious exploration. The Sylvan delegation, their sensors running at maximum capacity, analyzed every aspect of the human vessel. They studied their ship's internal structure, their crew's physiology, their weaponry, their communications. They even attempted to interpret their entertainment, which involved moving images projected onto flat screens. The Krill, meanwhile, remained wary, their security teams on high alert, their weapons charged and ready. The initial reports confirmed the Council's fears. The humans were unpredictable. They were capable of extraordinary feats of ingenuity and equally extraordinary acts of carelessness. They possessed advanced technologies, but also relied on seemingly primitive methods. They held a deep reverence for their history, their art, their music, their literature. They seemed to value relationships, community, and the collective well-being of their species, at times more than their own survival. And yet, despite all this, they remained calm. They did not seem intimidated by the advanced technology of the Sylvan. They did not appear threatened by the presence of the Krill. They treated the Xylar scouts with curiosity rather than fear. They spoke of cooperation, of shared futures, of the importance of understanding. This calmness, this seemingly unflappable demeanor, was perhaps the most unsettling thing of all. The turning point came when the Sylvan delegation proposed a trade. They offered advanced energy-shielding technology in exchange for access to the humans' data archives. The human leadership, after a period of intense internal debate, agreed. The exchange began, and the Sylvan gained access to the vast amount of knowledge the humans had amassed through the ages, including their scientific and social developments. It wasn't long before the Sylvan, poring over the human data, began to understand. They saw the pattern, the structure behind the chaos. The humans were not chaotic, they were strategic. They were not irrational, they were logical. They approached every problem, every challenge with a methodical, almost scientific approach. Their supposed weaknesses were, in reality, carefully calculated choices. Their empathy was a tool, not a liability. Their self-sacrifice was not a sign of weakness. It was a weapon. The Krill commander, however, remained unconvinced. "These are just words, explanations," the Krill said, their voice sharp. "We must test them. We must observe them in battle. Only then can we truly understand the nature of this species." Lyra, however, disagreed. "I believe they are not what we assumed. The information we have obtained, the clarity of their reasoning, proves that their actions are not erratic. They are carefully planned and carried out to achieve a specific goal. We must approach with caution and respect, otherwise we risk the same fate that befell the Gralak." The humans, in the meantime, continued to share their knowledge. They provided the Sylvan with insights into their history, their culture, their technology. They explained their system of governance, their methods of resource allocation, their approach to diplomacy. They even offered to assist the Sylvan in improving their own technology, sharing their understanding of materials, energy, and propulsion. Then came the reveal, the moment that truly shook the Sylvan delegation. The humans, in their data archives, had a record of the Gralak War. They had studied it, analyzed it, and understood the mistakes the other races had made. They knew the Gralak's weaknesses, their strengths, their strategies, and they possessed a detailed analysis of every major battle, every crucial decision, every critical turning point. "They knew everything," Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. "They knew our strategies, they knew our vulnerabilities, they could have predicted our every move." The Krill commander's hardened facade cracked. "So their wariness, it wasn't fear." "No," Lyra said, "it was caution and maybe understanding." The most shocking of all was the revelation of the human military strategy. The documents showed a war plan for multiple scenarios, taking into account any aggressive moves and attacks by others. The plan included information on every known weapons system and ship design. The plan was not designed to win wars. It was designed to end them. The human approach to warfare was not about conquest or domination. It was about preventing conflict from escalating. It was about de-escalation, negotiation, and the preservation of life. Their war machines were designed not to kill, but to disable, to deter, to protect. This was a concept utterly foreign to the Krill. When a message arrived from Earth from the Endeavor, it was clear what their next move would be. "We have detected a disturbance in the Gamma Quadrant," the message said, the human voice calm and even. "A rogue signal originating from an unknown source. We are initiating a scouting mission to investigate. We invite you to join us." The Krill commander, after a moment of stunned silence, turned to Lyra. "You are suggesting an alliance." "I am suggesting," Lyra replied, "that we learn from them." They did join the humans. The combined fleet of Sylvan, Krill, and Xylar ships, alongside the human vessels, set course for the Gamma Quadrant. They were, in the beginning, a force of uneasy allies, each species wary of the other. But as they worked together, as they faced the unknown, they began to trust each other. They began to understand each other. They began to learn from each other. The rogue signal turned out to be a massive, derelict megastructure, a structure of unknown origin. It was drifting aimlessly through space, its surfaces covered in an alien script. As they drew closer, they received a warning. The structure was emitting a highly potent energy signature. It was a beacon. It was a trap. But the humans had anticipated this. Their vessels were equipped with advanced defensive systems. They had analyzed the energy signature and developed countermeasures. They had developed a plan. The battle was unlike anything the Sylvan, Krill, or Xyler had ever witnessed. The humans did not engage in a head-on assault. They did not attempt to overwhelm their opponents. Instead, they moved carefully. They moved methodically. They used their advanced sensors to identify key vulnerabilities. They used their knowledge of their opponent's tactics to predict their moves. And they used their understanding of diplomacy to create openings for negotiation. The humans used their ships not as weapons, but as tools. They employed precise maneuvers, disabling enemy vessels with pinpoint accuracy. They used their energy weapons to disrupt the megastructure's systems. They used their technology to hack into the enemy's communications network, creating confusion and disarray. And then they did something truly unexpected. They transmitted a message. They transmitted a message of peace. They offered their opponents a chance to surrender. The enemy, confused and disoriented, hesitated. They had never encountered such a tactic. They had been prepared to fight, to kill, to die. But they had not been prepared for mercy. They agreed to negotiate. As the humans led the way, with the Sylvan, Krill, and Xyler assisting, they discovered that the megastructure was of ancient origin. It had been built by a species known as the Forerunners, a civilization that had vanished long ago, leaving behind only whispers and legends. The Forerunners had been masters of technology, but they had also been plagued by a fatal flaw, a deep-seated distrust of each other. They had built the megastructure as a weapon, a final act of self-destruction. The humans' greatest act of strategy, perhaps, was in bringing the Forerunners' technology to the attention of the Galactic Council. They suggested the megastructure was a relic of a time before cooperation. They showed how it could be used for good. The humans, in their unassuming manner, had achieved what the Sylvan, Krill, and Xyler, with all their advanced technology and military might, had failed to do. They had brought peace. The final scene took place back in the Citadel Council chamber, the Grand Arbiter Cathar once again at the helm. But this time, the mood was different. The tension had dissipated, replaced by a sense of hope, of possibility. The flickering holographic displays showed the smiling faces of human ambassadors, sharing insights into their culture. "The humans," Cathar announced, his voice filled with respect, "have demonstrated to us something extraordinary. They have shown us that true strength lies not in brute force, but in wisdom, in empathy, and in the unwavering pursuit of peace. They have taught us that the greatest victory is not the conquest of an enemy, but the understanding of a friend." He paused, his multifaceted eyes looking up, as if contemplating the future. "And now we see the real twist. The discovery of the megastructure has brought to light an even greater danger. The Forerunners, in their final act, sent a signal that traveled across the galaxy, a signal that we believe has been received, a signal that speaks of a threat beyond our comprehension." The holographic display changed, showing a celestial map, and then zoomed in on the constellation of Cygnus. This is where the signal originated, and what is more, it appears the signal was received and acted upon. The first sign, the first warning, the first contact with something alien. The display shifted again, revealing a strange, pulsating light emanating from the depths of space. A new species, far more advanced, far more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen, had arrived. The new threat brought more questions than answers. Were they allies, or something else entirely? The council chamber fell silent. The humans had brought peace, but the peace they had achieved was fragile. The future, as always, was uncertain. The galaxy, it seemed, was only beginning to understand the humans. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. As the camera slowly zoomed out, a single, flickering image remained on the display. It was a message from the humans, a message of hope, a message of caution, and a message of what might come next. The message read, "Welcome to the age of discovery.